North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho has slammed President Trump over his remarks, describing them as sounds coming out of a barking dog.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
If Trump was thinking about surprising us with the sound of a dog barking, then he's clearly dreaming.
The latest jab from Pyongyang's top diplomat came shortly after his arrival in New York on Wednesday, where he will attend the UN General Assembly amid growing pressure on his country. Ri is scheduled to address the UN gathering on Friday before meeting with Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Saturday. The North Korean diplomat is expected to strongly condemn the US when he takes to the podium, while arguing for the necessity of Pyongyang's nuclear and missile arsenal.
The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, defended Trump's bellicose rhetoric during a TV show interview, saying Trump's threat to destroy North Korea if it attacks Washington was not out of line, considering the regime's ongoing provocations.
Ambassador, thank you. When the president spoke in his speech about totally destroying North Korea if forced to defend ourselves or our allies, what exactly did he mean? Under what circumstances would he consider totally destroying North Korea?
Well, I think that's just common sense. I mean, if you look at it, we have said multiple times, the president said it, members of his team have said it, we don't want war. That's the last thing anyone wants. We don't want loss of life. That's the last thing anyone wants. But at the same time, we're not going to run scared. If, for any reason, North Korea attacks the United States or our allies, the U.S. will respond.
The United States has great strength and patience. But if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary. That's what the United Nations is all about. That's what the United Nations is for. Let's see how they do. It is time for North Korea to realize that the denuclearization is its only acceptable future.
Period. That's what's going to happen. What you're seeing now is we continue to go through diplomatic measures. We continue to exhaust everything we have. And the key right now is that other countries actually support the sanctions and follow through with them, and they also continue to isolate North Korea until we can get them to come to the negotiating table. But until then, that's just the reality. If they were to strike the United States, of course we would have to respond back.
So,
yes.
Just to clarify, so you're specifically saying that is if North Korea attacks first?
I mean, we can't play out the scenarios on what's going to happen, but obviously it would take something very serious for the president to have to make a decision to do something back. But there's a lot of things between where we are now and that situation that can be done. There are a lot of military options that can be done. And so the president's not going to spell out specifically what he's going to do, when he's going to do it, or where he's going to do it. But there are many options that he's discussed with his national security team that should North Korea do anything irresponsible or reckless, that he has to choose from.
China, on the other hand, rebuked Trump's threat of destroying North Korea, seizing the moral high ground. Beijing's foreign ministry said the North Korea issue should be solved through political and diplomatic means and imposing economic sanctions on Pyongyang. France and Germany also commented on how risky Trump's rhetoric was.
Any military intervention will lead to the kind of material and human destruction that I believe must be absolutely avoided.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel also expressed opposition to any form of military solution and stressed diplomacy as the only answer to the North Korea issue. While UN member states are at apparent odds at how to resolve Pyongyang's nuclear ambition, one thing is clear: the international community must bring North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons program. But this goal may be easier said than done, as the regime is again expected to justify its nuclear weapons development at the UN General Assembly when its top diplomat takes a podium on Friday local time in New York.
Question on Iran. On Korea, the administration has said that this is not aimed at China. But you heard the president say today that China has told its central bank not to do business with North Korea. Secretary Mnuchin said that he called the Chinese. So how is this not, and especially you've talked about how China is really the main financial backer of North Korea. So how can this not really be directed at China? And then on Iran, is there a way to ramp up pressure, as what you were talking about, Iran's destabilizing activities throughout the Middle East, which I think a lot of your allies agree on, without violating the agreement per se, as Secretary Tillerson said? I mean, is there a way to get allies to rally around more terrorism type and other sanctions while keeping the nuclear provisions in place?
So first of all, with the sanctions on North Korea, it only impacts those that continue to do business with North Korea. So if China does business with North Korea, yes, it will impact them. If there are countries in Africa that do business with North Korea, it's going to impact them. So really it depends on countries that choose to continue to support North Korea over the rest of the world that's asking them not to. In reference to Iran, you have a couple of processes that take place. On October 15th, the president has the decision to make on whether to certify or decertify. And that's U.S. law. That has nothing to do with the JCPOA or the Iran deal. That's U.S. law. And U.S. law requires the president every 90 days to decide whether the Iran deal and other elements of the UN resolution, which would include ballistic missile testing, which would include arms smuggling, which would include support of terrorism, those things, it asks the president to look at all of those things. And if he still thinks that the deal is in the best interests of the United States, then he certifies. If he thinks that the deal is, that the situation is not in the best interests of the American public, then he doesn't certify. At that point, it goes to Congress. And he works with Congress on how to reshape the situation. But the Iran deal and U.S. law are two different things.
You're saying that he could decertify without specifically withdrawing from the deal.
That's right. I mean, that's just the option that he has, and that's the Corker-Cardin law that came into effect that allowed that to happen. What I will tell you from a UN perspective, what we're looking at and what you're going to hear us very vocal on is the fact that 2331, the resolution that was in place, what we saw was it basically wrapped in with the nuclear deal. It said if Iran did any of these things, it would be in violation. And since then, the Secretary General has come out with a report that said they have violated all of those things. Their support for terrorism, their arms smuggling, the idea that they continue to do ballistic missile testing, and they need to be called out for that. And that's something that you will see us do as we go forward in the United Nations to make sure that they know that just because we did this nuclear deal, it doesn't give them a pass on all the other things that they're doing wrong. Yes.
Ambassador, you said that in your opening remarks that one of the topics that everybody had an opinion about this week was talking about was Burma. The president gave a 4,600-word address to the global UN body, in which he didn't mention the word Burma or Myanmar at all. Did you have any direct input in the speech? Did you press him to address Burma in the speech, or were you disappointed that he did not?
Well, I can tell you he's very concerned about Burma because he's talked to the national security team and asked exactly what was going to be done. He asked the vice president to speak about it in his speech, which is why the vice president has, and he's been very involved in the decision making. I think that he, like every other leader, can tell you we're all scratching our heads over Burma because all this has happened in 3 weeks. You have almost 500,000 people who have left, and the tragedies and the abuse that's happened there is something that a lot of us can't stomach. So no, it's mainly, if you listen to all the leaders, everybody is just trying to figure out who can move the officials in Burma and where to go. So
he don't think he's spoken publicly about it.
Well, he's very concerned about Burma, and I think that I did talk with the vice president about it quite a bit, and that's why he was very passionate about it. But really, he was speaking because the president asked him to.
The President Trump, since he's taken office, spoken directly with Aung San Suu Kyi, and he's done so in the last few days, or anybody in the administration talked to her about what's happening. And would you press her publicly to do more in her role as state counsel?
Not only have we pressed her, we've pressed the military. So we had two things happening. Secretary Tillerson did call her and did discuss the situation with her, but then also General Dunford is calling the head of the military to say, look, we've had a relationship with you, but this cannot continue, and we need to know what you're going to do about it. Yes.
Yes, Madam Ambassador, you've been very vocal on
the shortcomings of the Iran deal and Iran's behavior, perhaps beyond the strict confines of your job here. Where does that come from? Is this your own sort of direct opinion after hearing about Iranian behavior here, or through conversations with the president, or just talk a little bit about that?
I had conversations with the president. He was very concerned about Iran. He was very concerned about the deal. And so I went to learn about it and to find out from the IAEA, to look at the resolution, to look at the violations. And so it was just digging deep on the situation of what we found. And then that's why I gave the speech on the scenario that the president's being faced with on the decisions to be made. But, this situation, it's not an easy situation by any means, because you look at North Korea and you look at the fact that for 25 years, we were looking at bad deal after bad deal after bad deal and broken promise, broken promise, broken promise. So here we are again, and we don't want to be dealing with the next North Korea. And so that's why he's taking it so seriously and saying we need to look at every aspect of this and make sure that it truly is in the best interest of the American public. Yes.
The German foreign minister said today that any disavowal of the Iran deal would reduce the likelihood of getting any similar disarmament deal with North Korea. Do you share those concerns that any actions on the Iran deal might reduce the possibility of getting a deal with North Korea? And separately, as a point of clarification, do you support a full oil embargo on North Korea?
So I think let's go back to Iran in the first place. What I will tell you is a lot of countries are going to have their opinions on whether the U.S. should stay in the deal or not. But those countries don't have Iranians saying death to America. They're not saying death to Germany. They're not saying all of those things. What we can see is terrorist attacks happening everywhere with ties to Iran. And that's something we need to be careful about. And so it has never moved the U.S. to care about what other countries say. What does move the president is, are we doing everything in the best interest, security interest for the American people? And that's what you're seeing is playing out. In terms of comparing Iran to North Korea, that's exactly what we're doing. Is we had so many bad deals with North Korea, and everybody looked the other way. And every time they broke that deal, they looked the other way. Well, where are we now? They now have a hydrogen bomb. They now have ICBM. So if we don't do something, and we make the same mistakes we made with North Korea, we will be dealing with Iran that has nuclear weapons and ballistic missile technology. And so that's the concern, and that's what we're trying to do with that, yes.